And so if you've been with us, you know that we've been going through Judges, and I already told you for December I wanted to hit a pause on that because we're coming into Christmas time, and I just wanted to do something a little bit different this year. And one of the things that I've talked about in previous years is all the different traditions that we celebrate as different kinds of believers, right? Believers celebrate all kinds of different traditions for different things, right? Whether it be Christmas or Easter or any other kinds of holidays. We all have a lot of different traditions. But one of the ones that we most definitely have in common in our definitely our society today, especially in North America, is we have a lot of very similar traditions when it comes to Christmas. And one of which, of course, the one that I want to talk about today is actually, and I'm going to be talking about for the next couple of weeks, is going to be gift giving, right? Gift giving it's a big part of Christmas. If you didn't know, and if you still have money left in your account, right? Gift giving is a big part of Christmas. We like to give gifts, and really the thing about gift giving is right. Different people obviously have different feelings about it, but I always like to give people. The idea for me for gift giving is I want it to be a blessing to someone, not a requirement that I have to fulfill. That's why I hate when you do those little things where it's like, oh yeah, you got to buy for so-and-so, and I hate that. I don't like that. I want to just be able to bless who I want to bless. And so, but anyway, we all have different traditions when it comes to that and gift giving. And I think it's interesting because of all the traditions that we celebrate when it comes to Christmas time and of all the things that we do, right? We got Christmas trees and stuff, and there's arguments about how that started, whether it was Martin Luther or whether it was someone else that started the Christmas tree. And even down to the very date of December 25th, it's always argued. But what's not argued is whether or not gift giving has been a part of it, because we read even right at the beginning there was definitely an exchange of gifts that happened, and we're going to look back there today at Matthew chapter 2. And what's interesting about the story of Christmas is whenever we read the story of Christmas, we usually read Luke, because Luke is like the Christmas story that we all think of, right? That's where all of a sudden Mary and Joseph, they're struggling, and they got to get to, and there's no room at the inn. Where are we going to stay? We got to sleep at the stables, and this poor 9-month pregnant lady has to lay down next to a sheep or something. I don't know what's going on there. But it's not a very good situation. But then all of a sudden the angels show up, and as we just sang, the angels we have heard on high, right? The shepherds see the angels, and it's this great, spectacular sight. And that's all found in the book of Luke. But what does the book of Matthew tell about? Well, book of Matthew is where we find these other individuals that have become a part of our Christmas story, and yet, as we read, you're going to find it's almost weird. We've almost kind of pasted them into the story. And it says, so we're going to read at Matthew chapter 2. I think I have it at verse 10? Yep. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. And they opened their treasures, and they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. So this is, of course, the famous, we often describe them as the three kings. Right, and they come, and you've probably heard this before. There wasn't three kings, there was three gifts. Yeah, I know. We have no idea how many of the magi there were. We have no idea how many of these wise men there were. But what we do know is that there was three gifts. And we do know that they followed the star. And that's how they arrived at, did you catch it, the house where Jesus was. This is important, and of course there's details later on that tell us that they didn't actually make it to the manger scene. But it seems that what happened that night at the manger scene, that caused something to change, and that led to the star that was in the sky that allowed them to follow and said, something significant has happened, something amazing has happened, and we have to go be witnesses ourselves. And of course that takes time. It takes time to get there. Now we don't know exactly how long it took them, but we know they must have come from quite a ways, because from where they were out in the east, when they looked west and saw the star, they thought it was over Jerusalem. And so that is, of course, where they first headed. And then when they finally did arrive, they offered what they said. First off, what's interesting is they bowed down and worshiped, right? They saw the child and went, that's him, immediately recognizing who it was. And before they gave gifts, before they did anything else, they bowed down and worshiped. This is important because of the gifts that they brought. These gifts tell us something. And today we're going to be talking about the first gift, the gift of gold. Now, okay, so I decided I wanted to check out, this is how I like to do things when I'm doing my study in the Bible. I want to see, how does the Bible often talk about different things? And so you go look at frankincense, and there's not many references, maybe 3 or 4 references. It's oh, this is easy. Now I found out how the Bible talks about frankincense. And myrrh actually has quite a few more instances, but I was but still small enough that it's manageable. And then gold, don't even try. Basically, it's the Bible talks about gold. There are so many references to gold that I really had to just begin to narrow it down, because I wanted to really narrow it down to what did the gold signify? Why was the gold important? And we know, of course, that it ended up having some great importance for Jesus and his family. And so the first time I want to go look at gold is all the way back. We see gold has been incredibly useful, and both for trade and for actual use as well, because gold is actually fairly unique for a metal. For a metal, it's actually kind of soft. It's one of the weird things about gold. Don't know why, but it's soft. So that means that if you're wanting to trade and you needed to change your weights and stuff like that, then it was actually quite manageable with gold to be able to break it into different levels of pieces and stuff like that. So it actually had quite a versatile use that way. Of course, today, and even then, we find that gold is actually incredibly useful for another one of its strange properties, and that's that it can be pounded incredibly thin and still maintain integrity. This is incredible. Not all metals can do this. Most metals will actually break, and they become too fragile, and they can't actually maintain their integrity. Another thing about gold is that gold is rare. Now you may think, there's so much gold in this world. Yes, you're right, there's so much gold. But in comparison to things like other metals, such as iron or copper or tin, gold is exceptionally rare. And so therefore, its rarity also adds to its value. Now why do I say all this? Because gold throughout history, as we look back all the way at Genesis chapter 13, it says this. So this is at the call of Abram. So Abram went up from Egypt to Negev with his wife and everything he had. Lot went with him. And Abram had become very wealthy in livestock and in silver and gold. That's incredible. Even back then, right? And we've often talked about this before. The wealth of a person was measured in how much they had, and especially in livestock. If you had many fields full of grains and livestock and lots of animals and stuff, then this was a sign of wealth. But also in silver and gold, because silver and gold was something that was a lot more mutable and able to transfer. It's a lot harder to go round up 100 sheep than it is to go get out a couple pounds of gold, although that's a lot of gold. The other thing about gold is that gold is also, not only is it always seemed to have represented wealth throughout all of human history, including today, right? People with a lot of gold, that represents someone who's very wealthy. And I'm not sure if you've paid attention to the price of gold lately, but it means you're incredibly wealthy as the price of gold continues to go out of control. But as we saw, gold also conveyed a status. Gold meant something to the people around them. When people saw someone with gold, and we see this in Genesis 41, when people saw people wearing gold, for example, it held a meaning. And in Genesis 41, could you put that up, please? Thank you. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger, and he dressed him in robes of fine linen, put a gold chain around his neck, and then he had him ride in a chariot as his second in command. Yeah, that's okay. This is the gold chain, of course. Not only did he have the signet, but the wearing of the gold, the wearing of it showed his status as someone who was important in the land of Egypt. And we, of course, read later on that it didn't just end there, right? He actually had quite a bit of wealth of not just gold, but silver as well. But he was quite well decorated with gold as someone who was very important, right? The only one more powerful than Joseph in the entire land of Egypt was Pharaoh. And so this was meant to show anyone that came across, right? Because back then, it's not like you had a passport or a driver's license. You could just show someone, hey, this is who I am. This is my position. You didn't have that kind of identification. You identified yourself through things like the signet ring or through things like the wealth that you wore upon yourself. Wearing gold like that showed your status. You were someone who was important. So 2 things so far. It showed signs of wealth and showed signs of status. And then, of course, these 2 things are incredibly important because of what comes up next in Exodus 25. Now, if you don't know, Exodus 25 is when God is giving the designs of the tabernacle and all the different things to Moses. And in Exodus 25, it says this: make this tabernacle and all its furnishings exactly like the pattern I will show you. Have them make an ark of acacia wood, which, by the way, if you don't know, is very nice wood. Have them make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits high. Overlay it with pure gold, both inside and out, and make a gold molding around it. Cast 4 gold rings for it, and fasten them to its 4 feet, with 2 rings on one side and 2 rings on the other. Then make poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. Insert the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark to carry it. The poles are to remain in the rings of the ark, and they are not to be removed. Then put in the ark the tablets of the covenant law, which I will give you. Make an atonement cover of pure gold, that's the mercy seat, about 2.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide, and make 2 cherubim out of hammered gold and at the ends of the cover. Can you imagine how beautiful this must have looked, first off? Like, this thing has the appearance of solid gold, right? But it's definitely completely overlaid. Joseph was an incredibly important individual. I don't think anyone will ever deny that. Joseph was literally the right hand to Pharaoh. Pharaoh, who was an incredibly powerful and important figure in Egypt, also would have wore gold. He would have had a lot of jewelry and the cuffs, all that stuff, right? We know all we've seen pictures of the appearance of how the pharaohs would have decorated themselves. But not one of them sat on a throne of gold. If you're not familiar with what's being described here as they are describing the construction of the tabernacle, this is, first off, where the people come to worship God. Right? And if you're unfamiliar, it's the outer court of the tabernacle. That's where people came to worship and offer their burnt offerings. And things out there were fairly common. There was bronze and stuff like that. But then as you moved in and you got into where the priests could go, the common folk couldn't go in there, but the priests could go. Then you had the golden lampstand. If you would continue reading chapter 25, you'll read about this. The golden lampstand and the golden platform where they held the bread of the atonement, and of course the golden chalices and cups and stuff like that would have been in there as well. Everything was gold. Why? Because God wasn't just their God, right? If you remember, they're a theocracy. God is their king. And he's not just any king. He's the most high king. He has the highest status, the most power, the most importance. And so it's not just enough for him to have a chain of gold or to be decorated lightly with gold, but it is all gold. And then, of course, what they're describing here, the Ark of the Covenant was, of course, in the Holy of Holies, the throne room of God, where even only the high priest of all the priests, only the high priest could enter, only once a year, and only under extremely strict circumstances. Because God's throne is that holy, that powerful, and it's demonstrated by everything essentially in that room being marked in gold. We can read later that you may be thinking, well, okay, maybe, but this is a material thing. Does God really think that much of it? Well, we can read later on in the book of Daniel, chapter 5. This is the first one that always comes to mind for me in the book of Daniel, chapter 5. Starting at verse 1, it says, when Belshazzar, if you remember, Belshazzar was Nebuchadnezzar's son. So Nebuchadnezzar had this encounter with God, and he understood who God was. But Belshazzar, not so much. He was a lot more arrogant, and he gave a great banquet for 1,000 of his nobles and drank wine with them. And while Belshazzar was drinking his wine, he gave orders to bring in the gold and silver goblets that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, so that the king and his nobles, his wives and concubines, might drink from them. And so they brought it. So these are these are the ones consecrated for holy worship to God. Okay, this is why this is a big deal. So they brought the gold goblets that had been taken from the temple of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his nobles, his wives and concubines drank from them. And as they drank the wine, they praised the gods of gold and silver and of bronze, iron, wood, and stone. And if you don't know, verse 5 is where all of a sudden a disembodied hand shows up and begins to write on the wall. And he is rebuked. God does care. These symbols have meaning. These symbols have power. Yes, it's still just gold. In a universe that God literally created by speaking. Yes, it is just one of the material things, but he understands the power not just of material things, but of symbols, and the symbol of what this gold meant and how powerful it is. Not only that, but later on when the temple was rebuilt, so if you don't know, the Temple of Solomon was destroyed when the city of Jerusalem was invaded. And then later on, Herod the Great decides he's going to start rebuilding the temple. And he does, and he begins to rebuild the temple. But this time, instead of just being the things that were overlaid in gold that were inside the temple, he's going to overlay almost everything with gold. Now, there's obviously debate over whether or not he did this for himself or for the glory of God. But either way, he recognized the power that symbol had. That vision of a golden temple had for so many people. He recognized that it showed his status and wealth, and to a point, divinity as well. And we see all of this all come to a crux together later, and I don't think I put a reference up for this, but in Revelation 22, when the city of God, the city of Jerusalem, comes down out of heaven. And if you've never read that picture, it's very descriptive. It talks about all the jewels and all of the different precious minerals and stuff like that all compose this city that is God's, where the streets are paved with gold. Right? There's gold everywhere. Why? Because this is God's holy city. The symbol of gold, the gift of gold that these magi are giving, remember, we call them wise men for a reason. They were very wise. They knew what they were doing. They recognized that it showed that they recognized that this was a king that sat before them. This was someone who was powerful, who was mighty, and no lesser gift would do. You don't give someone like that copper or tin or brass. You don't give someone like that, your leftover wineskins that you had left over. You give them your very best. And we don't know how much gold was given, but we know that they fell on their face and worshiped. We know that they opened up their treasures. This was something that they really held on to. And we know that they gave to the one that they recognize as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Now I ask you, if you knew you were sitting in front of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, do you hold back? Well, I'm going to give God my 20% of my gold today. Yeah, I'm only going to give him a little bit. Or are you going to give everything you have? If you're wise enough to follow a star halfway across the known world, you're going to give your very all. See, this is just the first gift that is gold, and it shows us who God is, who Jesus is, that this wasn't just any other child being born, but this was the Son of God being born among us. And the other two gifts are going to inform us even more on what's going on in this particular situation. But these gifts are so much more important than just three good things. And not only that, they had a very practical value, because if you know the story of Jesus in his early childhood, as was predicted even in Isaiah, we know him and his family, right? Joseph and Mary have to flee to Egypt. They have to live in a foreign land where he's not able to earn for his family quite enough. And these gifts actually become incredibly important in sustaining his family. These gifts are well received. And because of the devout worship of these wise men, the gift of gold, the first gift, is given, and we forever should and hopefully do recognize the kingship that comes with that gift. So as we go into the Christmas season, let's remember, we're not just celebrating the birth of baby Jesus, we're celebrating the birth of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords coming to live among us, who will eventually die for us, because he loved us so much more than we could ever understand.